Welcome to The Threat Show, powered by Fletch.
The social engineering aspects are wild. I mean, they're nuts. Essentially, it's arbitrarily easy to make you look like Darien in this video, right? And sound like Darien or whatever else. And so you could look like Biden and say, launch the bomb.
Hi, and welcome to The Threat Show, powered by Fletch. I'm Darien Kinlan, VP of Technology here. And with me each week is my recurring co-host, Chris Wilder, Research Director at Tag Cyber. Welcome back, Chris.
Thanks, Darien. It's always usual. Good to see your smiling face.
Well, likewise. So we're joined by special guest this week, Simon Crosby. Simon has an impressive list of experiences from his time in cybersecurity, from founding and serving as CTO of ZenSource and Bromium, to lecturing at University of Cambridge, and later becoming a member of the board of directors at Cambridge in America. Currently, he's an investor and equity partner at DCVC, a venture capital company focused on implementing AI in parts of the economy that have yet to adopt the technology. Welcome to the show, Simon.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
All right. Well, we'll be talking with Simon more in depth shortly, but first, let's run through this week's trending threats and do the numbers, so to speak. So compared to last week, I think we've seen roughly a net change of maybe 3 new major threats kind of enter the landscape. But one of the things that we got recently by DM was one of our viewers asking us, hey, what do you consider at Fletch to be a major threat, right? Is it a vulnerability? Is it a malware campaign? Is it a threat group? Is it a breach? And the answer is kind of all of the above. We kind of track security topics as if they pose a threat to the business. And that's really what we mean when we say major threats. Another type of question we get is, well, is every single vulnerability, is every single malware a separate threat? And the answer is really not necessarily. We kind of group things together as they're being talked about in a related set across all these different sources on the internet. Does that kind of make sense to you, Chris?
Yeah, it does. This is all very consistent. You could rack your entire brain trying to categorize and parse out different types of threats and things like that, but they're all bad. I'm just more surprised that it's the first week of March.
It creeps up on you, right?
It does.
Well, let's kind of double click into the numbers a little bit more. So while 3 is kind of the net, actually 11 major threats kind of emerged over the past week. 10 transitioned from, covered by one particular outlet to 2 or 3 into trending. And then another 10 kind of went mainstream, covered by mainstream media outlets. And then lastly, 7 exited our coverage because we haven't seen any new activity about them over the past 30 days. So even though it looks like there's been small amounts of change, net, we did see quite a bit of activity this week comparatively. Does that make sense to you, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because these emerging threats, these 11 that are here, I mean, we'll cover some of them in the rundown, but these 11, I guarantee, are going to move into mainstream. They're big ones, and they're big, the ugly ones. And, I think just from the inactive side of this, from our research, we typically look at different threats, and they tend to be very cyclical. Just take Stuxnet for a while, for one. We're looking at, we look at everything in 13 years for each, major breach. Stuxnet happened 13 years later. We believe that the whole critical infrastructure and OT world is going to start getting hit again. It's just looking at the data on this. And I think that this is very consistent. We're going to see a lot of the tactics changing, but I think these 11 that we've got now are going to move over to the right very fast. And the inactive ones, they'll come back.
Yeah, just a matter of when, right? So let's get into it then. So for this week's interesting threats, we actually got quite a bit of surprising ones, I'd say. I mean, there was a new revelation and an old breach. Some people are surprised. Other industry veterans are probably like, this is kind of par for the course. 2 new types of malware that have some interesting qualities into it. And then a couple of different attacks against trusted computing, secure boot. Should we be surprised, concerned, or is this kind of normal? Let's get into more details. So for the first one on our list, LastPass, they were breached back August of last year. No real surprise there. However, on Monday, the company released more information about the details of that breach. and how basically one of 4 senior DevOps engineers responsible with production access to LastPass was compromised, not through their work computer, but rather through their home computer. Specifically, the attacker managed to compromise media software package known as Plex, pretty common. And then once that happened, the attacker loaded up a keylogger on the home computer's system. But what was really surprising is the fact that the DevOps engineer then proceeded to log into LastPass production environments from their home computer. And as soon as they typed in their master password for their own vaults, the attacker got access to everything. So if you're a security professional and you're trying to advocate for a separation of employees not using home computers to access production data, this is kind of Exhibit A. I'm curious, Chris, your thoughts here. Is this more commonly done than what people think, or is this a rare event?
No, I mean, without a doubt. I mean, just look at the vulnerabilities and look at what happens with GitLab, for example. You have both your personal email and your business email in there. You share those, and I think developers just overlook this. And one of the things that, just looking through this, it kind of more of on a behavior perspective. When I was doing a lot of different assessments, I did some forensics on some of the biggest breaches that ever happened in entertainment and retail and things like that. And we'd go through and we'd identify where the breach happened and how it happened. We'd list out the kill chain, and they were, oh man, thank you. And a year later they got hit again because they didn't make any changes. And this is very common because people just say, all right, well, we'll just patch and update and we're safe. But it's not true. You have to fix the problem. And this is a great example of what not to do. When you identify something, you mitigate the threat. You have to change things in order to make sure that you don't get hit again. And it's partly cyber hygiene, but it's also just awareness throughout the organization. Developers tend to focus on speed, where we as cybersecurity people tend to focus on being deliberate about what we do. And this is very preventable with just education and with just kind of having better discipline.
Makes sense. I mean, this is a clear advocate for kind of a zero trust environment.
Yeah. Well, there's that too. I could go on about that too, but yeah, exactly.
So next on our list is actually a new type of malware that was discovered, and protections were rolled out across the Apple ecosystem through their internal EDR product called XProtect. SentinelOne engineers kind of took a look at those new signatures and discovered that there's now coverage to identify, protect, defend against a new XMRig cryptocurrency mining malware called Honkbox. And it's like, well, okay, what's so special about this? And really, what sets this particular type of malware apart from past ones is that it's now leveraging something that's kind of next-gen Tor, where called the Invisible Internet Project, for all of its command and control. So rather than being easily identifiable on the internet, now malware operators are deciding to use these next-gen Web3 technologies to kind of avoid detection. I kind of wonder if we're seeing the beginning of a new trend here, Chris.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the nice thing about, Apple, we talk about this, I think, every week, which is kind of getting redundant. Security is a new thing. It's a new toy for Apple, and they don't really know how to deal with it, know what to do with it. And I think they're getting better at it. But, these different Web3, and I think the next two groups of attacks are going to be AI-based malware and then Web3, because just a lot of people don't understand it. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to respond to it. I mean, NIST doesn't even know how to respond to AI. So this is really more of a function of the industry catching up with the reality.
Fair enough. And then a different malware family was also talked about this week, arguably one that targets more consumer-grade devices, consumer-grade computers, called Milobot. And here, people are kind of scratching their head. Why would, a malware operator target systems on the internet that don't really have a whole lot of sensitive data? A lot of people ask, why should I bother installing security software? I'm not a target. What could they possibly want from me? And it turns out that just simply your internet access is of value, because all these compromised systems with Milobot or acting as nodes on a third-party service called BHProxies. So literally the operator was selling proxy access to all these compromised systems in order to make money effectively. This is just another variation of what would be known as like an initial access brokers, but they're going after even lower hanging fruit. Is this normal, you think, Chris, or relatively common from your perspective?
It's becoming more and more common. I love Krebs. I'm a big fan, but this is actually getting more and more normal, especially as we become more and more distributed. A lot of times, why do I need to put security on an IoT device? Because crypto miners want to use it to mine at night. It goes back to that, secure everything. And Darien, we talked earlier, ZTNA is going to be one of the things I think that will probably help alleviate some of this, but we're still in a centralized world, and we don't know what we don't know, and inventory sucks, and it's hard to know what you've got. Fair
enough. So moving on to the next one on our list, people always talk about, well, I don't necessarily need a ton of different, patching solutions. I can just use a secure boot and a trusted computer, and everything's done. Unfortunately, ESET's discovered that there's a brand new malware bootkit that effectively evades secure boot, which was kind of theoretical. I think BlackLotus was talked about a couple of months ago, but now they've confirmed that it's actually a thing because they found the malware samples on dark web forums, which have kind of confirmed that, this is a way for operators to even target what otherwise would be considered secure systems. It's breathtaking, it's eye-opening, but should we really be surprised? I don't know, Chris. What are your thoughts?
So it's Chris Wilder's story time. So, gather around, kids. Now, when I was a few years ago, I was actually working on a project in Canada, and we were building IP65 RAN servers. And one of the things that we realized, we're jumping into this from a hardware perspective, saying, you can't hack a BMC, which is your boot module for a server, because it's easy to secure hardware, and the Bromium guys know this well. And so the thing that we found was when we went through, we did a CVE scan on the server before we went to first customer, and we had 6,000 documented CVEs that were on that server, specifically through the boot, through the chips, through everything, and we had to fix all of those. And by the time we were done, we had about 4,000 more. And so this is a never-ending cycle. And the one thing about boot is, if you can change the boot record, you can get the keys to the kingdom and own the system. So ransomware guys love this. So no, this is not something new. It's just a different method.
Yeah. And, the underlying vulnerability that they're using is not new. It's maybe a year old at this point. I mean, it's really something that I think Microsoft released a patch out for this a while ago, honestly. And it kind of makes you wonder, do people not patch secure environments because they feel like, well, in the name, it's already secure. Why should I bother? You know what I mean? It's just bizarre.
Well, I mean, people used to think you can't hack a BMC. And we put a bug bounty out there, and we put a website up called hackmybmc.com, and we believed that nobody could do it. And within a day, somebody had already taken it out. So it's just stuff you don't think about. And I come to work every day astonished, just the new stuff the bad guys come up with.
Yeah, and there's efforts to try to make trusted computing a little bit more secure, but it's a process, right? I mean, so we've got this practical one, and then Carnegie Mellon researchers discovered that there were two actual, theoretical attacks against just the TPM firmware, where a local attacker could basically just load any arbitrary code they wanted on it. So clearly, there's a lot more that needs to be done here to help kind of raise the bar, but it's great that they found it and that we're discovering these issues. But man, people that thought this was like the panacea that could stop everything, it's not happening, right? You still require layers of security.
Yeah, there is no panacea for cybersecurity, I can tell you that.
Exactly. So that's our kind of list for the topics for this week.
you want to dive deeper into this week's trending threats? Be sure to check out the interactive Fletch newsletter and Trending Threats app to see all the stories we talked about, peruse the threat index at your leisure, and more. Now, on to our special guest interview.
Let's switch gears and have a direct chat with Simon a little bit more about his experience with AI in general. Hey, Simon, how you doing?
Good, thank you. And thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, based on your experiences, what are some interesting use cases that you've seen for how AI can help in, cybersecurity use cases in general?
So wait, it can help and also create a new awesome attack surface. So, just think of it this way. There was an attack on a Tesla, right? Where if you taped over a stop sign, I don't know, with masking tape or something, the thing would steam through a stop sign, right? That's an attack. So
Sure.
What you have in these AI-powered systems is an enormous continuous attack surface. We have no idea how to get our hands on it and limit the attacks. We have no idea how to understand what models don't know or where their limits are or how you can get around them, right? And so that presents a whole new attack surface. Sure, AI will help a lot in detection and a bunch of other things, and we'll get there. But first off, AI is a new threat surface. I'd love Chris's view on that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more on that. One of the challenges with ChatGPT is everybody's debugging their code using it. And
You're right.
Yeah,
By the way, exactly right. So welcome to the era of approximately right code.
Yep.
And engineers who are lazy and download stuff created by ChatGPT or Copilot or something else. And God knows where this stuff is good enough.
No, you're right. And once you put it out there, it's out there, and it goes back into the algorithm to train it. And Simon, I think one of the things that you mentioned, which I think AI is going to only make the botnets more smarter, more adaptable. If you kind of because we're all kind of nerds watching Star Trek, you learn about the Borg, and a lot of times bots. They can go back and they can, continually do reconnaissance and adapt. But with AI, it makes it more dynamic. And that's going to be one of the biggest challenges with that.
But also this, Chris, it's arbitrarily cheap to sit and watch and learn about you.
You're right.
So finding your whole, so if you think about Star Trek, or actually not Star Trek, but whatever. In general, the business of trying to find the vulnerability in your particular world is pretty cheap. So the attacker can customize an attack for your environment, given just time and the ability to watch, your employees and how you use the internet and so on. So attacks will become arbitrarily personalized to your world.
Yeah, that's one of the big concerns that we're tracking right now is the effects AI have on phishing campaigns. Typically, we're a little bit more head on a swivel type. We're actually already pretty jaded, and we tend to look out for these things. But poor Karen in HR, she'll click on a link if it says Billy, who's down, 3 cubicles down from you, he's sick. We're putting a GoFundMe page together.
Right.
Click on the damn thing. And that's where the sophistication of phishing attacks are coming, because you're right. They are watching exactly. You can use AI to do behavior analytics. And
there was a very cool attack disclosed literally overnight where you can persuade the new Bing to download an attack, disclose information about all the other tabs in the browser, and then learn about the environment by effectively fooling the user.
Wow. It's basically a social engineering, 2.0
Yeah.
at this.
Exactly.
Wow.
I mean, the Turing test is the Turing test, right? And so these things are extraordinarily good at social engineering. And then they can just sit and wait and find out the appropriate information, leak it out by a hidden channel, and then you're done. The key thing here is that it's arbitrarily cheap to customize the attack to your particular environment.
Yep.
Right.
It's astonishing because you can learn a lot about somebody by their open tabs. And
Yeah.
my wife has like 9,000 open tabs, so we, it's a gulag of tabs. But
well, if you go back to Bromium, the whole point was every tab was in a separate VM, right?
Yeah.
And for good reason.
But you could still learn a lot about somebody if you can get in and see their tabs. And
Sure you can.
Yeah. That's you have a baseball tab open and you have a news tab, and you can probably figure out this person loves baseball and is a Republican. That's
Right.
you can find out about that, and there's a lot of ways. And social engineering campaigns are very, very adept at that. And I think this is a scary one. So
yeah. So we didn't talk about AI on the side of good, and sure, it can help a lot, and it will. And I think forward-looking vendors are figuring out how to use it to understand vulnerabilities in your environment and to counter attacks. So in the Fletch context, for example, the idea, everybody has spent a ton of money on buying point solutions to protect against a standardized notion of attack. Actually, the reason I like Fletch is it turns the idea the opposite way around. So it says, hey, let me understand your environment, and then I can find where you have vulnerabilities, which is totally awesome.
Yeah, it's leveraging AI to deliver more personalized experiences, personalized threat analysis is relatively new and emerging from that standpoint.
Well, it's kind of like ChatGPT for your own world, right? So essentially you can say, who you could find out who is the vulnerability in your org. You can find out, did they do bad things? Did they do stupid things? Who's logging on to production infrastructure from a home PC?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Quick question though, because kind of down that same path, do you think AI's in terms of kind of where it's being used now, where it's going to be, do you see AI right now kind of more in dealing on the social engineering side of it, with human behavior versus the vulnerability side, which is kind of more the operational cybersecurity world? Or is it kind of in tandem, or do you see one moving fast?
I think it's both. I know a little bit about what's going on at Fletch under the covers. So, and Darien could fill us in, but vendors that know the intimate details of how attacks work will use that to protect you. And that's cool. But the social engineering aspects are wild. They're nuts. Essentially, it's arbitrarily easy to make you look like Darien in this video, right? And sound like Darien or whatever else. And so you could look like Biden and say, launch the bomb, right? So the problem is this whole social engineering aspect is really beyond normal human experience. We're used to seeing people and listening to them and then trusting them. And we have a lot to learn.
Yeah, yeah.
It's going to be bad.
Yeah, I penned an article last month specifically about deepfakes and how they're being used in the Ukrainian conflict to go back and forth. I can't tell you how many times Zelensky has surrendered, but it's
right.
And they're indistinguishable. But this article was very focused on how criminal enterprises are using deepfakes to affect law enforcement, to affect the investigation process, to affect politics. The intelligence community is starting to adopt deepfakes for psyops.
Sure they are. And that they're doing it both. By the way, they're also doing it to protect their own.
Yeah.
So they're using deepfakes or AI to protect the identities of their own people.
They are. Conversely, they're starting to use deepfakes to coerce confessions and conviction, which is another big challenge. And so I think the bad guys are going to be ahead of us for a while as we catch up as good guys or relatively good guys.
Yeah. I think we have never dealt with this kind of threat before. So, I mean, even if you look like, I don't know, we can make you look big and whatever. I mean, you're a big guy, but we can make you look like Joe Rogan or something. And sound like him too.
Yeah, I know. And my wife would love that. But no, you're right. And it can be anything you want. And it's kind of terrifying, but really kind of cool, the opportunity that we have going forward. But I think
so I think there's another opportunity, which is to increase or use AI or use new techniques to detect deepfakes and detect humans doing bad stuff or non-humans doing bad stuff.
Yeah. I think the technology for deepfakes, the meta tags are coming out for deepfakes. I think that technology is coming fast. I think AI is a little bit scarier because my colleague Ed Amoroso, he's a professor at NYU. ChatGPT has completely rocked his entire world, and he's actually gone from doing written exams to actually sitting down, having a cup of coffee with somebody, and doing an oral exam.
Right.
They're freaking out.
Or making people write in pencil or something else.
Yeah. So
it seems like the common theme here is that AI is really challenging the norms of what we think of as authentic content, right? And it's becoming indistinguishable to figure out, okay, what is authentic versus what's been assisted? And how do you deal with that challenge across all these different mediums? I think we're at kind of an inflection point where we don't know what's going to happen next. We're going to see some crazy, amazing use cases of AI. It's going to be extremely scary. And it's kind of the wild, wild west.
One thing, we know that as security pros, we can reason about these attacks, but the average worker, they have no idea. I mean, they'll just do the obvious and click on the link or whatever they have to do, but they will do the wrong thing. Yeah. So it's a huge attack surface.
Darien, I actually may be AI, you don't know.
It's crazy. I mean, who knows what it's going to be like. I think until we get AI technology that's able to identify and detect inauthentic content, we're going to have this problem.
Well, the problem is that it's detecting inauthentic content is arbitrarily hard, right?
Yes.
Yep.
By the way, one of the reasons I like Fletch is that, I kind of think of it as ChatGPT for my world, right?
Yep.
So I can ask any question or think about it in an arbitrarily personalized way. It's not the web, it's my world and my people, and what am I vulnerable to? And I think there is a huge need for AI that's kind of on side, that understands me and my world, and is out to bat for me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's going to be interesting because Darien, I want to have Simon back in a few months to regroup this conversation, see where we're at, because it's changing that fast. And you've got some really great insights, man.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I mean, a lot of people are wondering, are we at the beginning of the S curve? Are we at the middle? Are we at the end? Who knows, right? We don't know.
Well,
but it's
okay. So, by the way, here's another silly idea. Musk was out there with this idea of full self-driving in beta, right?
Sure.
Well, it's such a stupid idea. Okay, it's an arbitrarily, brutally hard problem to solve.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you called it AI assisted driving,
sure,
and it could be in beta forever, right? Just getting better, but full self-driving, no fucking way. It's never gonna happen. Okay, it's just never gonna happen. So what you know is that these AI systems, no matter how well trained, facing the real world and real people, there'll be a limit to how well their training actually applies, right? Yeah. And that is always going to be a really fruitful area for the bad guy.
Right, figuring out those boundaries.
And by the way, in the AI domain, it's interesting in the security world to think about whether this favors vendors with huge training data sets or vendors with cool AI algorithms. So if I'm Google and I see everything, do I know all the attacks and do I do a better job? Sure. For spam, they do an awesome job, right? But they don't know my world. And they can't understand what my people are doing and that kind of stuff. So I think there's a huge need for AI tools on my side that understand things I could never understand and can find my vulnerabilities.
Makes sense. Yeah. So personalization really matters a lot in that context.
Yeah. Well, in our world, it's detection and triage. And so, so many of the things I need to worry about as opposed to just putting the fire hose on me twice a day. So. Right.
Well, I was thinking about the first part of your show here, which was dealing with standard attacks. Okay. It's like, is this a big deal? Well, I have no idea. If I'm vulnerable to it, sure, it's a big deal. If I'm not, it isn't. Okay. So the idea that there is a standardized attack on a known vulnerability, okay. I think that is, I don't know, the first 30 years of infosec or whatever, 40 years, right? The next bit is all about personalized attacks knowing me.
Yep.
And that's scary.
Yeah.
So much as we say, I could make a deep fake that sounds like Biden and says launch the bomb, I can make a deep fake in the cyber domain which understands you and, launches the attack at the right point. So the attack will arbitrarily vary.
Right. And, it'll be interesting to see how this landscape changes, not in a couple of years, but in a couple of months. I agree with you, Chris. I think it's worth checking in again and seeing, where we are on that curve, because only time will tell, honestly.
Yeah.
But it's certainly an exciting time.
It certainly
Absolutely. It sure is.
Job security.
Yeah, exactly.
InfoSec is job security, right?
Yeah.
You can rely on the fact the bad guys are arbitrarily smart and will always do something new.
Yep.
Exactly. That's human creativity for you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. This has been very enlightening. We've covered the gamut of so many different topics. Simon, we'd love to have you back on the show in a couple of months' time just to see where we're at with this whole this whole theme because it's been crazy so far, and who knows what the threat landscape is going to be like.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Yep.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us this week, and stay tuned for next week when our guest speaker, Dave Newman from Tag Cyber, will be joining us to cover the next set of interesting threats. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thanks, Darien.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into The Threat Show. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe to us on YouTube, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and interact with us on Twitter @The Threat Show. Also, be sure to subscribe to Fletch's interactive newsletter and Trending Threats app to go deeper into the stories we discuss and the threat index. Be sure to stay tuned to stay ahead of threats.